Hello, I am Jason Giuliano with EDL 854, the case study. To summarize the case, Carlos Santos, principal at Briardale Elementary School, is confident in his ability as a building leader. The school serves as a community activity center, so a lot of the activities within the community are hosted there, which is a great way for the community to be involved in the school. Briardale is one of 6 elementary schools within the district. Schools in the district compete for funding. They do this through fundraisers, in which the foundations that were formed for each school raise money for curriculum purposes. So it's a good supplement to what's already there for their curriculum. Mr. Barely, a graduate of Harvard and current parent in the district and new to the district, became president of the foundation at Mr. Santos' elementary, the Briardale Foundation. To raise money, Mr. Barely organized a school raffle. He got his idea from when he was in college. His fraternity did a fundraiser, which was called Cash Raffle. The sheriff was tipped off about the activity at the school. The moment that the first ticket was sold, Mr. Barely was arrested for a misdemeanor. The incident was on the front page of the local newspaper. Let's talk about legal and ethical issues. Was anybody harmed by the decision? Not physically, but we do have a lot of issues with the legality of the situation as well as ethical issues. First, obviously, Mr. Barely being arrested, that misdemeanor goes on his record now, and so he has to deal with that. But when we talk about the legality of it, you must have a license to conduct a cash raffle, and in most states, you do need some type of license. You also must register before hosting the event. And in fact, some states, it's actually illegal to host a cash raffle. A state like Kansas, you don't necessarily have to have one if you're only going to, or if you're raising anything under $25,000. Anything over $25,000, you do have to have that license. However, when Mr. Barely was in college, their fundraiser went over $100,000. So there's obviously a concern for the amount of money being brought in. But we didn't know what state they were in, so we're not sure of the actual legal laws when it comes to cash raffles. The ethical side of things, some schools are at a disadvantage. Some schools get more money, more funding just because they're in a richer area, and that kind of requires especially the foundations or any type of fundraiser to be more intense, and the more money you get, the better. And this was kind of the driving force for Mr. Barely trying to really get a good fundraiser and not look at all sides of the issue. Also, there's a need for an overseeing leader. Just because the foundation has a principal or a president doesn't necessarily mean that president knows all of the ins and outs of the fundraiser. So it's important that we're looking at every aspect of it, if it's an ethical way to raise money or not. To synthesize, an attempt to raise money for Briardale Foundation, Mr. Barely attempts to use a cash raffle, which leads him to being arrested. These are the facts. The people involved, for the most part, is Mr. Santos, the principal, who, being very confident in his ability to lead the school, there was definitely a big issue in that. Mr. Barely, now the foundation president, and also current and new parent. The place in which this was located, Briardale Elementary, it's a K through 5 school, and it has about 600 students. And program. Obviously, we're dealing with fundraising here, and then also the legality of it and raffle laws. The conflict could have an effect on stakeholders. The principal's reputation has definitely been damaged, and he could even be at fault for this and lose his job. Students' loss of funding for curriculum. They use this fundraising as a way to supplement their curriculum, and so it may not end up being as well-rounded as everybody else's that had money to pay for that. Other foundations, it's going to affect them because this can cast a shadow on fundraising going forward. It might ultimately stop it. We just don't know at this point, so it can definitely make things a little bit irky for the rest of the foundations. And then the community. There's a damaged relationship with the school. The first thing that they see is a cop showing up and taking away the guy that's leading the fundraiser. So, and then for them also to see it on the front newspaper that the president of the foundation was being arrested. So the school and the community may not have a great relationship at this point. The community might be nervous about going to more fundraising events, and they also might not think as high of the school and be kind of concerned about what the school's doing. And then not all stakeholders have been consulted. There needs to be a consultant for all fundraisers, somebody that can kind of go in there and say, you can do this and you cannot do that. These are the options. First thing, Mr. Santos could do nothing, but this could end up losing his job. They could get a decrease in funding and lose community support. Number two, address foundation policies. Could be seen as overbearing, and less people might be involved or interested, because this is a great way for parents to be able to kind of take control and be able to kind of flex their muscle within the school. But if they have to always go to the principal, then they might not be as interested in it. And then three, eliminate foundation policies. This is going to lose that extra supplemental money that they have that's good for the school. They're going to lose that. And it also is going to damage the relationship with parents, because all it takes is that one bad egg to ruin it for everybody. And now everybody's upset because they think that the one person should have been dealt with instead of getting rid of all of the foundations. So let's talk about the pros and cons. For number one, doing nothing, a pro, well, it just might be a learning moment for everyone. And it might be a one-time ordeal. I think if you do nothing, then people kind of see, well, as long as you don't do the cash raffle, then we'll be fine. And then most people will probably even think, well, let's make sure we check all of our fundraisers and make sure they're legal. The cons for that, it does show a lack of institutional control by the principal. Again, could lose his job, and more similar issues could come down the road. Option number two, shows immediate action. Continue raising money is another good thing about that. That's something that could definitely happen. And avoid issues in the future. Get to keep foundations. However, puts fundraising on a hold for a time. So even though you're eventually going to be able to continue raising money, at that current point, fundraising would just be stopped or paused to kind of get those policies set in place. It could also reduce interest from parents. And then number three, eliminate foundation policies. The principal and schools take control of fundraising, all control and full institutional control. You don't have to worry about what outsiders are doing anymore. If something goes wrong, well, then that falls on the principal's shoulders, and you can either take that heat if you want, or just not have any fundraising at all. But the cons, there is then going to have that visible disconnect from the public and community. Kind of shows a lack of trust with others, because not everybody else had this issue. So it's also a large time commitment and a heavy workload for an already very heavy loaded workload for the principal. So the best option is number two, address and rewrite foundation policies. This gives the principal the opportunity to make things right. It may not come in the most immediate action, and it might not look like something right away, but in time, and once those policies get into place, it does show that the principal was proactive in fixing it and making it right for the future without looking like a tyrant by just getting rid of all of the foundations. It's a much needed change, as there's not enough oversight involved. One thing that kind of makes me nervous is having parents to have total control, because they don't always check all of the ins and outs. Provides a stronger future for the foundations and helps avoid any further legal issues. And it can be a great experience to work together closely with the principals and parents. So as a principal, you get to work even more with the parents, and the parents get to work more with the principal and develop a really good relationship. When we implement this plan, really you have to start by getting a group of people that you trust. And this could be a handful of different people. It could be other principals in the district. It can be along with those principals. It could be other community members. It could be people outside the community that could have a voice that kind of gives you extra dimension. And so people with different experiences and knowledge coming together to establish policies regarding the foundations and fundraising. The principal and group will conduct research for all legal issues regarding schools and fundraising. Led by the principal, the group will create a policy book that states the foundation principal will need to have fundraisers signed off by the building principal, and the policy book will also contain all legal options for fundraising. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed.